Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going exploring the origins of Bitcoin. We'll be diving deep into the foundational paper Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system written by the enigmatic Satoshi Nakamoto. We know you want to understand how this revolutionary technology works, but maybe the thought of complex algorithms and cryptographic jargon has you feeling a little intimidated? Well, fear not, because we're going to decode this for you.
That's right. We're going to break down the core concepts of Bitcoin in a way that anyone can understand, no matter your technical background. We'll uncover the brilliance of Satoshi's idea and explore why this paper, published back in 2008, sent shockwaves through the world of finance.
It's fascinating, really. This paper introduced the world to a decentralized digital currency. And it all started with a simple question. What if we could create a system where we didn't have to rely on banks or governments to handle our money? What if we could transact directly with each other?
And that's precisely what Bitcoin sets out to do. To understand its significance, we need to take a step back and look at the limitations of traditional online payment systems.
You know, I was just thinking about that the other day. I had to send money to a friend overseas, and the fees were ridiculous. Not to mention the whole process felt like it took forever.
That's a perfect example of the issues with traditional systems. They rely on intermediaries, like banks or payment processors. And these middlemen often charge hefty fees for every transaction. Plus, there's the inherent risk of fraud and the need to trust these institutions with our sensitive financial data.
It's like handing over your wallet to a stranger and hoping they give you the right change back.
That's a great analogy. And not everyone has equal access to these traditional systems. Many people around the world are unbanked or lack access to affordable financial services.
So how does Bitcoin solve this problem? It seems like quite the challenge to create a secure and reliable system without relying on these established institutions.
Bitcoin's brilliance lies in its elegant solution. It replaces centralized trust with something called cryptographic proof. Instead of relying on a bank to verify transactions, Bitcoin utilizes a decentralized network of computers.
So it's like a system of checks and balances. But instead of people, it's computers keeping everything in line.
Exactly. This network is constantly verifying and recording transactions on a public ledger called the blockchain. Think of it as a giant transparent, an immutable spreadsheet accessible to everyone. It tracks every single Bitcoin transaction, and once a transaction is recorded on the blockchain, it's virtually impossible to tamper with.
Wow, that's impressive. But if everyone can see the transactions, where's the privacy? Wouldn't everyone know how much Bitcoin I have and where I spend it?
That's a great question. And the answer lies in how Bitcoin handles identities. The transactions themselves are public, but the identities of the participants are not directly linked to their Bitcoin addresses.
So it's like using a pseudonym for your financial activity?
Precisely. It's like seeing a train move along the tracks. You can see the train going from station to station, but don't necessarily know who is on board.
That's a clever way to maintain some level of privacy. So how does Bitcoin ensure that only the rightful owner of a Bitcoin can spend it? The paper mentions something called digital signatures, but what exactly are those?
Imagine a digital signature as a unique, verifiable seal on a document. It's created using cryptography and serves as proof that the person who signed it possesses the private key associated with that signature. This is how Bitcoin guarantees that only the person who controls the private key can authorize a transaction.
So it's like a super secure digital fingerprint that proves ownership. Every Bitcoin transaction involves a chain of these digital signatures, transferring ownership from one person to another.
Exactly. And this leads us to another crucial concept, the double spending problem. How do we prevent someone from copying their Bitcoin and spending it multiple times?
That's a good point. If Bitcoin is just digital information, it seems like copying and pasting your way to more Bitcoin would be easy.
That's where the blockchain comes in again. Think of it as a public record of every Bitcoin transaction ever made.
So once you spend a Bitcoin, that transaction is broadcasted to the network and permanently recorded on the blockchain, making it impossible to spend the same Bitcoin twice.
Exactly. It's like announcing to the world, hey, I just used this specific Bitcoin, and everyone can see it's no longer available to be spent again.
Okay. I think I'm starting to understand the brilliance of this system. But if this blockchain is constantly growing as new transactions are added, how is all this data managed? And how do we ensure the security and integrity of this ever-expanding ledger?
That's where the concept of mining comes in. It's one of the most intriguing and often misunderstood aspects of Bitcoin.
Right. Mining always makes me think of people with pickaxes and shovels digging up digital treasure. It sounds so mysterious. What are these Bitcoin miners actually doing?
They're not digging up gold.
Yeah.
But they are doing something incredibly important. They are responsible for verifying transactions and adding new blocks to the blockchain.
So they're the ones who are making sure that all these transactions are legitimate and that the blockchain remains secure.
Precisely. They do this by solving incredibly complex mathematical problems using specialized hardware. It's a computational arms race to secure the network and earn rewards.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So the first miner to solve the problem gets to add the next block to the blockchain and receives Bitcoin as a reward for their efforts.
Exactly. And this process, known as proof of work, not only secures the network, but also introduces new Bitcoins into circulation. It's a clever system that incentivizes miners to contribute their computing power to maintain the network's integrity.
So it's like a self-sustaining ecosystem where miners are rewarded for their work, which in turn keeps the entire system running smoothly. That's pretty incredible. But this all depends on computers being connected to the network, right? What prevents someone from just shutting down the entire network?
That's one of Bitcoin's most powerful features. It's a decentralized network, meaning there's no single point of failure. It's not controlled by any single entity,
Government,
or institution. Instead, it's spread across thousands of computers worldwide.
So it's kind of like the internet itself, but for money. It's built to be resilient and resistant to censorship.
That's a great way to think about it. Bitcoin inherits the same decentralized and resilient nature of the internet.
It's clear to me why this idea has captivated so many people. It's truly a radical departure from the traditional financial systems we're used to. What stands out to you as the most remarkable aspect of Bitcoin's design?
What I find fascinating is how Bitcoin emerged as a solution to a specific problem, creating a digital cash system that eliminates the need to trust any third party. And it achieves this through some truly elegant concepts: digital signatures for ownership, the blockchain for transparency and immutability, and proof of work for security and consensus.
It's like a perfectly engineered puzzle where all the pieces fit together seamlessly. Now that we have a good grasp of these foundational concepts, let's delve into some of the more nuanced details of Bitcoin's operation.
Let's do it. I'm ready to dive deeper.
Great. We'll pick up right where we left off in part 2 of this deep dive into Bitcoin. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before we delve further into the intricacies of Bitcoin, let's revisit a key concept we touched upon earlier: how users can verify Bitcoin transactions without having to download the entire blockchain.
You know, that was something I was wondering about. As the blockchain keeps growing with every transaction, downloading the whole thing, it seems like carrying a library of every financial transaction in your pocket. Who has the space for that?
Exactly. That's why Bitcoin employs a clever system called Simplified Payment Verification, or SPV.
SPV. Okay, that sounds intriguing, but also a bit technical. Could you break it down for us? How does this simplified verification actually work?
Imagine you want to confirm a specific sentence in a book. You don't need the entire book,
Yeah.
just the page number and perhaps a few surrounding sentences for context. SPV works similarly. Users only need a small amount of data, specifically the block headers from the longest blockchain, to verify a particular transaction.
So it's like getting a sneak peek into the blockchain's table of contents. But how do I know if my specific transaction is included in one of those blocks?
This is where another ingenious concept comes in: the Merkle tree. It's a data structure used to organize all the transactions within a block. Think of it like a family tree, with each transaction representing a family member. At the bottom of the tree, you have all the individual transactions. As you move up, the tree transactions are grouped together, and their combined data is represented by a single hash. This continues until you reach the top of the tree, where a single root hash represents all the transactions in the block.
So each block has its own Merkle tree, and this tree helps me trace my transaction.
Precisely. Because of the way the Merkle tree is structured, you only need a small branch of the tree, called a Merkle branch, to prove that your transaction is included in a particular block.
If I can trace my transaction back to the root hash of the block, I know it's legit. It's kind of like tracing my ancestry back to a common ancestor in a family tree.
That's a fantastic way to put it. It's a very efficient way to verify transactions without needing the entire blockchain.
But earlier you mentioned that SPV users could be tricked by fabricated transactions. If the network is overpowered by an attacker, doesn't that undermine the security of SPV?
It's true that SPV relies on the assumption that the majority of the network is honest. However, remember that Bitcoin is designed to be incredibly resilient. It would require an immense amount of computing power to successfully attack the network and fool SPV users.
So the risk is there, but it's highly improbable.
Exactly. It's a trade-off between security and convenience. SPV provides a practical way for everyday users to interact with Bitcoin without running a full node, but it does come with slightly weaker security guarantees.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about privacy. We discussed how Bitcoin addresses aren't directly linked to identities, but the paper also mentions using a new key pair for each transaction. Can you explain why that's important?
Absolutely. Using a new key pair for each transaction adds an extra layer of privacy. It makes it much harder to link transactions to a common owner.
So even if someone figures out who owns one of my Bitcoin addresses, they can't necessarily trace all my other transactions?
Exactly. It's like using a different alias for each online purchase you make. It helps to obscure your overall financial activity.
That makes sense. But is perfect privacy even possible with Bitcoin? The paper mentions some limitations when it comes to multi-input transactions.
That's an important point. When you combine multiple inputs into a single transaction, it reveals those inputs were previously owned by the same person. There is a potential for some linkage there.
So it's not completely anonymous, but still much more private than traditional banking systems.
Absolutely. Traditional banking systems store all your financial data with a central authority. They know everything about your transactions. Bitcoin, by its very nature, is designed to be more private and less susceptible to surveillance.
That's a huge difference. Now, shifting gears a bit, I'm curious about how Bitcoin handles the actual sending and receiving of value. Could you walk us through how that works?
Of course. Let's talk about combining and splitting value. This is where the true flexibility of Bitcoin transactions comes into play.
Sounds good. I'm ready to learn more about how Bitcoin handles the movement of funds.
By combining and splitting value, I'm all ears. It sounds like this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of how Bitcoin actually functions as a currency.
It really is. Think of it like this. Let's say you have a bunch of small Bitcoin payments you've received, kind of like having a jar full of coins.
Okay, I can picture that. My digital coin jar.
Now, let's say you want to buy something that costs more than any of those individual payments. You'd need to combine some of your coins to reach the total amount, right?
Yeah. Just like gathering up enough change to buy a coffee.
Precisely. And that's where Bitcoin transactions with multiple inputs come in. You can take several smaller Bitcoin payments and combine them into a single transaction with a larger output to cover the cost of your purchase.
So I'm basically bundling my digital change together.
Interesting. And what about the opposite? What if I have a larger amount of Bitcoin and I want to make multiple smaller payments?
That's where multiple outputs come in. You can split that larger amount into several smaller outputs, each going to a different recipient.
Ah, so it's like writing a check but digitally, and with the ability to pay multiple people at once. That's quite flexible.
Exactly. And what's even more impressive is that you can have a transaction with both multiple inputs and multiple outputs.
Yeah.
You combine several smaller payments and then split the total into multiple payments all within the same transaction.
Wow. That's a lot of flexibility packed into a single transaction. It's becoming clear how Bitcoin can handle a wide range of transactions, from tiny micropayments to large transfers of value.
It's a testament to the ingenuity of Bitcoin's design. This level of flexibility is one of the key reasons why Bitcoin has gained so much traction as a digital cash system.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. We've explored the limitations of traditional payment systems, delved into the ingenious solutions Satoshi Nakamoto presented, and uncovered the intricate workings of this revolutionary technology. From digital signatures and Merkle trees to the fascinating world of mining and the flexibility of Bitcoin transactions, it's all connected in a way that's both elegant and a little bit mind-boggling.
It really is. It's like a symphony of cryptography and decentralized innovation. And to think it all started with a single white paper published back in 2008. It's remarkable how far Bitcoin has come since then.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for our listener today? What's the key takeaway from our exploration of Bitcoin?
I think the most important takeaway is that Bitcoin is more than just a digital currency. It's a fundamentally new way of thinking about money and finance. It's a system built on the principles of trustlessness, transparency, and decentralization. And these ideas have the potential to disrupt a wide range of industries far beyond just finance.
It's a paradigm shift that has the potential to reshape the financial landscape and our relationship with money in profound ways. It's exciting and a little bit daunting to think about all the possibilities.
It certainly is. The future of Bitcoin and blockchain technology is full of potential, and it's up to us to explore it responsibly and thoughtfully.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a question to ponder. What are the long-term implications of this technology? How will it shape the future of finance and our relationship with money? What impact will it have on our lives? This is just the beginning of the journey, and I encourage you to keep exploring, learning, and asking questions. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to unlock the next big breakthrough in the world of cryptocurrency. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Until next time.